By the time Rebecca McCarthy felt her knees threaten to buckle on the frozen post road, she had already dragged a bleeding man 1/2 mile with her shawl knotted hard beneath his shoulders, and no one from Brackenmere Hall had come after her, though she had screamed herself hoarse across the yard. The evening wind came knife-cold from the marsh, cutting through her thin wool dress and the old cloak she had mended at both elbows. Her palms were raw where the fabric burned them. Every few yards the man gave a low, wet sound in his throat, and she dropped to her knees beside him, pressing both hands over the spreading heat at his side until it slowed, then began again. "Not yet," she told him, though she did not know his name. "If I stop, you die, so I shall not stop." She had learned at Brackenmere that most promises were made by people with power and kept by those without it. In better days, her father's days, the long front windows had been washed bright, the kitchen had smelled of yeast and rosemary, and she had been Rebecca, not girl. In Lady Catherine's reign, Polish remained and generosity vanished. Rebecca, at 22, kept accounts she was never credited for, hemmed table linen she was never allowed to sit at, and slept in a narrow former nursery, whose latch did not hold. The house had once been hers in prospect. Now she moved through it as unpaid labour wrapped in family name. Lady Catherine called her, whenever company could hear, "that plain dark little thing," with a laugh that invited agreement. Strangers often looked twice at Rebecca anyway, first for the pale, fine-boned face and large grey eyes, then away, reminded by rank and tone that beauty without money counted less than neat silver on a tray. Rebecca had trained herself not to flinch. She kept her wit hidden behind lowered lashes, read old account books by candle stub in the laundry after midnight, and wiped away tears before they could be called weakness. No dowry, no protector, no room with a lock that worked. But danger came, and she moved first. The ditch water had soaked through her skirt to the thigh. Mud clung heavy as chains. Behind her, far up the road, Brackenmere Hall glowed with candlelight and carved stone, warm as indifference. When she had first seen the wreck below the broken bridge at dusk, she had thought for one stunned second that a farm wagon had gone over. Then she saw the lacquered panel split down one side, and, in the dimness, a crest picked out in gold, the rising ash tree of the Duke of Ashford. One horse had broken loose and run. Another lay shuddering in the traces. A servant with blood at his temple had said through chattering teeth that his Grace had ridden ahead with Jacobs, the one who could still sit a saddle to fetch Mr. Lyle, the surgeon in town, by the shorter lane. "He said he'd send men back," the servant kept saying, as if repetition might warm him. "He said—" No men came. And then Rebecca had heard a sound from the ditch below the road bank, a dragged breath no healthy chest could make, and found the other one half under bramble and slush, coat torn, blood pumping through his fingers. She had run back to the hall for help. Lady Catherine had stood in the small withdrawing room, with cards in her hand and guests at her shoulder, jewels bright at her throat. "A cart?" she repeated, as if Rebecca had asked for the moon. "To ferry some highway casualty? Certainly not. Ducal mishaps are no business of ours." "He will bleed to death." Then he should have chosen a safer road. "Wash your hands and stop this scene." When Rebecca did not move, Lady Catherine's mouth sharpened. "You presume much in this house for one who contributes nothing but noise." So Rebecca had taken the old grey shawl from the servant hall peg, ignored the laughter behind her, and gone back into the dark. Now she dragged, paused, pressed, dragged again. Her breath tore in her chest. Once she slipped and went down hard, cheek against frozen ruts, stars bursting white behind her eyes. She rolled, spat mud, climbed up, and kept moving. At last the lamps of town pricked through mist ahead like grounded constellations. Someone shouted. Footsteps slapped over cobbles. Hands reached for the man. Her shawl was cut loose. Rebecca swayed where she stood, suddenly empty-armed, and only then realised both sleeves were stiff with blood to the elbow. "Here! Get him on the table! No! Now! Mr. Lyle's voice cracked like a whip from inside the surgery. Rebecca followed because no one told her not to. The room smelled of spirits, hot iron, and fear. On the scrub table lay the man she had hauled through half the county. Face waxy beneath grime, dark hair stuck to his forehead. A groom she did not know crossed himself in the corner, and there, near the fire, immaculate in black riding coat and gloves untouched by mud, stood the Duke of Ashford. He turned as she entered. He was younger than Rumour, perhaps 30, but there was nothing youthful in him except the straightness of his shoulders. His expression had the polished chill of a man accustomed to command and disappointment in equal measure. "This is she?" he asked, not to her but to the surgeon, as one might ask if a parcel had arrived intact. Mr. Lyle did not look up from his instruments. "If this is the lady who brought him, yes." The Duke's gaze swept Rebecca from wet hem to bloodied hands and stopped, unreadable. "You took your time." She stared, too tired for courtesy. "I carried him. There was no cart." One dark brow lifted, sceptical as a blade. "Indeed." Before she could answer, Mr. Lyle barked, "Pressure here, harder. If she had not bound and pressed the wound as she did, your grace, he'd be dead before my floor took his blood." The silence that followed was brief but sharp. Something in Ashford's face shifted, contempt thinning into wary attention, as if he had expected a village fool and found an equation he did not yet know how to solve. He stepped closer. "What is your name?" "Rebecca McCarthy." Recognition flickered at once. Brackenmere was not obscure, nor was scandal. "McCarthy," he repeated, "of the hall near the bridge." "Of the kitchens, mostly," she said, before she could stop herself. A corner of the surgeon's mouth twitched despite the urgency. The Duke did not smile. "My man's name is Daniel Pike. If he lives, it is because you acted. For that I am in your debt." The words were correct. The tone held reserve enough for 10 apologies not made. Rebecca gripped the edge of the table as Mr. Lyle dug for the ball. Pike screamed once, then fell into shuddering quiet. She kept her hand where told, pressing life back into a body that did not belong to her world, and wondered whether anyone at Brackenmere had noticed she was gone long enough to care. By dawn, everyone in town knew. By noon, Lady Catherine had improved the tale. She received callers in dove-grey silk and pious concern, telling anyone willing to sip tea that her unfortunate stepdaughter had always been impulsive, and that wandering roads after dark among injured men was not the behaviour one can endorse in a modest household. By supper, Rebecca heard from the scullery maid that she had either thrown herself at a duke, robbed him, or both, depending on which market stall one preferred. "Your reputation is a cracked cup," Lady Catherine told Rebecca that evening in the morning-room, setting down her chocolate with delicate finality. "One cannot pour respectability into it and expect it to hold. Luckily, I have found a practical arrangement." Rebecca stood very straight, hands clasped to keep them from shaking. "What arrangement?" "Mr. Horace Bellamy has been patient over Brackenmere's outstanding notes. He is recently widowed and in need of competent domestic management. He has agreed to overlook your indiscretion. Bellamy, 60 if a day, with yellowed whiskers and fingers always damp with port. He had once patted Rebecca's cheek as if testing fruit. "No," Rebecca said. Lady Catherine blinked, surprised by the sound, if not the meaning. "My dear, this is not a request. It is my life. It is my house. You eat my bread." Rebecca almost laughed at that, remembering nights she had gone hungry so guests could be extravagantly fed. She swallowed it down. "You mean my father's house?" The slap came fast, more shock than force, but it turned Rebecca's head. Lady Catherine's voice dropped, silk over wire. "You will marry where I direct, or you will leave with nothing but the dress on your back. Given this latest disgrace, I doubt you'll find other shelter." When Rebecca reached the surgery again an hour later, cheeks still burning, she told herself she came only to return Mr. Lyle's borrowed cloak. She lied to herself neatly and kept walking. Pike was alive, though barely. Fever glazed his eyes, his breath rasped. He muttered in fragments while Mr. Lyle changed dressings. "Case! Not in the carriage! Ring! Bluestone! Tell his Grace! No, not her! Not—" "Easy," Rebecca whispered before she could check herself. The Duke stood on the far side of the room, coat off now, shirt-sleeves rolled, as if he had not left all day. He looked tired, for the first time, a hard line at his mouth, shadows beneath his eyes. When Mr. Lyle moved away, Ashford faced Rebecca directly. "I am told Lady Catherine refused assistance last night." "Ask her," Rebecca said. I intend to. I also intend to understand why my dispatch case disappeared between the bridge and town, and how one wounded man was left behind." "Do you think I know?" "I think," he said carefully, "that coincidences are expensive where I come from." There it was. Not accusation yet, but the shape of it. Rebecca met his gaze. "Where I come from, Your Grace, blood is cheaper than horseflesh." "That is why no one came." His jaw tightened. "If Pike was attacked for those papers, whoever planned it may have used local help." "Say what you mean." His pause was brief. "Did anyone pay you to deny? Daddy or him?" Something in Rebecca went still and sharp. All day she had borne mud, whispers, her stepmother's threats, and the taste of humiliation. This she would not swallow. "No," she said, each letter clean as cut glass. "Keep your money and keep your distrust if you must, but do not put your lies in my mouth." For the first time he looked taken aback. Mr. Lyle, bustling back with fresh bandages, glanced between them and pretended not to hear. Pike thrashed once, words spilling out clearer than before. "Ledger, Bellamy notes, crest ring, Lady C—" He coughed blood, and the rest drowned in it. Rebecca and the Duke both moved at once, he to steady Pike's shoulders, she to hold the cloth and keep pressure where the wound threatened to reopen. Their hands brushed, slick with the same red. Outside, the town bells marked the hour. At Brackenmere, Lady Catherine would be drafting invitations to a wedding Rebecca had not agreed to. In the surgery, a man who might clear or condemn her drifted between fever and silence. And somewhere between the broken bridge and Parliament, papers had vanished that powerful people wanted buried. Rebecca pressed harder, refusing to tremble. If Pike died, she lost more than the truth of one night. She lost the only witness who could prove she was not what they were already calling her. If she married Bellamy, she disappeared in plain sight forever. And if she did nothing, men with titles and men with ledgers would decide what had happened and write her name into the margin as they pleased. "Hold him there!" Mr. Lyle snapped. "If that stitch tears, I'll not get another chance." Rebecca braced both palms over the folded lint, Pike's fever heat burning through cloth and skin. Across from her, Ashford held his servant's shoulders down with a soldier's grip, face set and pale in the candlelight. Pike bucked once, then sagged, breath hitching. "Easy, Daniel," the Duke said, low and steady. "You're at Lyle's. You are safe." Pike's lips moved. At first it was only a rasp, then a word jagged loose. "Blue! Ring!" "Whose ring?" Ashford leaned closer. "Daniel, look at me! Whose?" Pike's eyes rolled under half-closed lids. "Her crest! Bellamy! Books!" Mr. Lyle hissed between his teeth. "He'll kill himself trying to speak. Quiet now, man." Pike slipped back into a rough, shallow breathing that was not sleep but exhaustion. Lyle tied off the final knot and stepped away to wash, shoulders bowed with fatigue. Rebecca did not move until the surgeon touched her sleeve. "You can ease off now." When she lifted her hands, blood had seeped through again at the edge of the dressing, but not in the awful pumping rush from before. Lyle checked the bandage, nodded once, and only then looked up. "He may live," he said, "if fever does not take him, if no one insists on interrogating him to death." Ashford released Pike slowly and straightened. "He named Bellamy." "He muttered Bellamy," Lyle corrected. "There is a difference." The Duke turned to Rebecca. His eyes were dark, sharp, and guarded as a drawn blade. "Mr. Horace Bellamy, your stepmother's creditor." She wiped her wrists on the ruined apron Lyle had thrust at her, as if she could scrub away the chill crawling up her spine. "Yes. Do you know whether he had dealings with my household?" "I know he has dealings with any man cornered enough to sign paper he hasn't read." Ashford held her gaze a moment longer, then gave one curt nod, as if filing the answer for later use. "I will post men at this door tonight." "Post them where townsfolk can see," Lyle said dryly. "Nothing calms panic like armed gentlemen in my waiting room." Ashford ignored the irony. "Inside and out. No one enters without my leave." "No one?" Rebecca asked before she could stop herself. "Not even me?" Something unreadable flickered across his face. "Especially not alone." It might have been concern. It might have been control. With him, she could not yet tell. She reached Brackenmere near midnight by way of the kitchen court, hoping to slip upstairs before Lady Catherine's maid saw her mud-caked hem. Hope had become a habit she distrusted, and rightly. The lamps in the back passage were still lit, and Lady Catherine stood waiting beside the sideboard, wrapped in a quilted robe the colour of old cream. "Homer at last," she said. "How touching! Shall we ring the church bell?" Rebecca closed the door behind her with numb fingers. "I was at Mr. Lyle's." "So I hear. You seem determined to be seen there." Lady Catherine's gaze dropped to Rebecca's blood-browned sleeves, and rose again with pleased disgust. "Were there many witnesses to your devotion?" "Enough to save a man's life." "Lives are saved every day without young women attaching themselves to ducal dramas." Rebecca started toward the stair. "I am tired. We can quarrel tomorrow." "No, we settle this now." Lady Catherine lifted a folded paper from the sideboard and held it between two fingers. "Mr. Bellamy calls at 11. You will receive him in the blue parlour and thank him for his generosity." Rebecca did not reach for the paper. "What is it?" "Articles, preliminary only. He is willing to marry within the fortnight, despite unfortunate gossip." Fortnight. Not even enough time for banns properly cried unless one paid for licence. Lady Catherine would pay. Of course she would. "I will not sign." Lady Catherine smiled, patient as a cat. "My dear, signature is a courtesy, not a necessity. You are of age, yes, but without settlement, income, or reference. You have no legal claim to this house, and after tonight's spectacle you have less social claim than ever. If you refuse Mr. Bellamy, you may seek your fortune as a paid companion, assuming anyone hires a woman talked about in taverns." She stepped closer, voice thinning. "Do not mistake stubbornness for power. You have none." Rebecca took the paper anyway, not to agree, but to read. Numbers marched down the page in Bellamy's clerkly hand. assumption of household obligations, transfer of personal effects, a sum listed as debt consideration against Brackenmere encumbrances. Smaller notes in the margin, nearly hidden, referenced 2 parcels near the Lower Canal survey and a lien against tenant rents on former McCarthy holdings. Her pulse kicked. She knew those fields. Her father had refused to sell them years ago when speculators began whispering about a proposed canal cut. The route had been contested ever since, valuing some acres to gold and leaving others worthless clay. Why would Bellamy's marriage contract mention liens on disputed land unless Lady Catherine meant to use Rebecca's name to quiet old claims? Lady Catherine misread her silence as surrender. "Better. You are learning prudence." Rebecca folded the paper once and looked up. "I am learning arithmetic." Lady Catherine's mouth hardened. "Go to bed." Rebecca went, but not to sleep. In the laundry attic, where she kept her hidden candle end, and a slate no one knew she owned, she spread the contract beside stolen glimpses of Brackenmere account pages she had copied over months, payments to Bellamy's office, legal disbursements to one Mr. Edmund Cray, solicitor, unusual purchases of wax seals and parchment in years when no leases had been renewed. She began marking dates. By 2 in the morning her eyes stung and her fingers cramped, but patterns emerged the way roads appear on a fogged map when one wipes hard enough. Bellamy advanced short-term notes. Lady Catherine paid interest not from household income, but from rents collected twice over on certain tenant lots. Cray filed debt actions within days of those collections. Properties then changed hands through voluntary surrender, signatures witnessed by the same 2 clerks each time. Too neat, too profitable, impossible without forged pressure somewhere in the chain. And on 3 entries in the margin, barely legible under blotted ink, the same notation appeared, a sea route confirmed by A. Ashford Canal. The candle guttered. Rebecca sat back, listening to the old house creak around her like a ship above deep water, and understood for the first time that Bellamy was not merely a predatory widower. He was a hinge. Lady Catherine had been moving pieces for years, and the carriage wreck might not have been chance at all. By breakfast, rumour had outrun facts and replaced them entirely. The butcher's boy grinned when Rebecca crossed the yard. 2 maids fell silent as she entered the still room. At 10, Mrs. Finch, the housekeeper, informed her, with visible relief at delivering bad news, that Lady Catherine had invited 3 neighbours to tea expressly to celebrate a most sensible family arrangement. By 11, Bellamy arrived. He smelled of clove pomade and old wine. His morning band was already replaced by a pearl pin. He bowed over Rebecca's hand in the blue parlour as if she were an agreeable purchase, and he a prudent bidder. "My dear Miss McCarthy," he said, squeezing her fingers too long, "a pleasure to find you recovered from your heroic exertions." She withdrew her hand. "I was not aware I had sought your concern. Soon enough you shall seek my guidance in all things." He lowered himself into a chair with a grunt and glanced at Lady Catherine. Women are often alarmed by practical arrangements at first. Lady Catherine's laugh tinkled. "Rebecca has spirit, Mr. Bellamy. One must admire it in moderation." Rebecca remained standing. "Mr. Bellamy, does your practical arrangement include liens on the East Marsh tenant plots?" For one beat his eyelids flickered. Then he smiled wider. "You have an appetite for business. How modern! It was my father's land." "It is debt-secured land," he corrected. "A distinction with legal consequences." Lady Catherine cut in, voice sugary and deadly. "Rebecca, fetch more tea. I am not a maid." "No," Lady Catherine said softly. "Not for long." Rebecca met Bellamy's eyes. "If I refuse?" Bellamy set down his cup. "You may. and watch your stepmother call notes due within 10 days. Brackenmere assets will be attached, staff turned out. You, of course, as an unmarried dependent of compromised reputation, would have nowhere respectable to go. Refusal is a moral position, Miss McCarthy. Hunger is a material one. He smiled again, all teeth this time. I advise the material. Rebecca looked from him to Lady Catherine and saw no difference between them except polish. She inclined her head once, enough to end the scene without granting victory, and left the room before rage could make her foolish. At the surgery, the air was hotter, rank with vinegar and sweat. 2 of Ashford's men stood in the hall as promised, boots muddy, pistols visible. One moved to block her, then hesitated when the Duke's voice called from inside. "Let her through." Ashford stood by the window with a sheaf of papers in his hand. He looked as if he had not slept. Neither had she. "You are watched," he said without preamble. "So is Pike." "So are you, I expect." "Always." His gaze dropped to the folded document in her hand. "What have you brought?" She set Bellamy's articles on the table between them. A marriage trap disguised as mercy. "Read the margins!" He scanned quickly, expression flattening as he reached the lien clauses. "Canal parcels. Connected to your disputed route?" "Yes!" His tone sharpened. "How did you spot this?" "I keep Brackenmere's household balances when no one is looking and pretends to believe my sums come from Providence." For a heartbeat's surprise stripped his reserve. "You reconcile ledgers?" "At speed." "Then sit." He pulled a chair toward the table, already stacking his own papers. Copies of estate abstracts, freight projections, legal notices from the county clerk. "Tell me if anything here matches your pattern." She sat. For the next hour they worked in taut, concentrated silence, broken only by questions clipped as account marks. Bellamy's note dated March. Matches double rent collected at East Marsh. Cray's filing fee. Same week as 3 tenants' surrenders. This witness name, Hale, appears on 6 deeds, 2 different spellings. At some point, mister. Lyle entered, watched them bent over columns like rival generals over maps, and muttered, "Either you've discovered treason or invented a new form of courtship. Keep your voices down. My patient hears everything when he pretends not to." Pike did hear. Near afternoon, as fever eased enough to leave him lucid in brief flashes, he opened his eyes and tracked them both. "Your Grace," he whispered. Ashford was at his side instantly. "I'm here." Pike swallowed painfully. "Case taken before bridge. Not robbers. Knew what to ask for." "Who?" Pike's gaze slid unfocused, then fixed on Rebecca with effort. "Saw ring, blue stone, McCarthy crest quartered, with falcon. Lady's kin. Cray wore it." Rebecca felt cold spread through her chest. Lady Catherine's brother had borne that quartered ring. After his death, it passed to his godson, Edmund Cray. Ashford's voice stayed calm by force. "You are certain?" Pike gave the ghost of a nod. "Shot me when I ran. Said blame road thieves." His breath caught. He coughed, grimaced, fought for the next words. "Briefs in oilskin, not in case. Hid under seat lining. Told Jacobs if I fell." "Jacobs is dead," Ashford said quietly. "Thrown from his horse on the short lane." Pike closed his eyes. No one spoke for several seconds. Outside, a cart rattled over cobbles. Somewhere in the house next door, a child laughed. The ordinary sounds made the room feel stranger, not safer. Ashford rose and faced Rebecca. "If Cray arranged the attack, Bellamy and your stepmother had advance knowledge of my route. They needed my legal briefs gone before quarter sessions." "Because the briefs contain what?" "Challenges to dispossession filings along the canal cut. Tenant petitions alleging forged signatures and coercive debt." His jaw flexed. I thought we had months before hearing. Someone wanted us blind now." Rebecca looked at the spread of numbers on the table, at her own cramped annotations beside his neat legal hand. The columns were no longer abstract. Each line was a family turned out, a lease swallowed, a winter without grain. Men like Bellamy did not merely count money, they counted on silence. Mr. Lyle cleared his throat from the doorway. "You may have your conspiracy, but I've a patient to keep alive. If either of you intends justice, start by keeping him breathing." Complications arrived before dusk. A constable from the magistrate's office appeared with 2 deputies and a polite request that Mr. Daniel Pike's statement be deferred until proper jurisdiction could assess reliability. Translation: keep him quiet, keep him unavailable. Ashford's title held them at the threshold, but not by much. The constable left with a bow too deep to be respectful. An hour later, Lady Catherine's groom delivered a note for Rebecca in a hand she despised. "If you continue your theatrical association with the Duke's servants, I shall inform Reverend Pritchard and the county ladies that you are no longer welcome under my roof. Mr. Bellamy will consider that a refusal." Attached was a second scrap in Bellamy's clerkly script. 10 days. Rebecca folded both without comment and fed them to Lyle's fire. "You cannot stay nowhere," Lyle said, watching the paper curl. "Can't I?" she answered. Ashford spoke before Lyle could. "You can stay here tonight, under guard." She laughed once, humourless. "A surgery full of blood and groans is the safest roof I have ever been offered." He did not deny it. By midnight, Pike worsened again, fever surging high enough to pull him into delirium. He clawed at the sheet, muttering names, dates, fragments of routes and parcels. Rebecca sat beside him with a damp cloth, repeating calm nonsense the way one soothes frightened horses. Twice he seized her wrist hard enough to bruise and gasped, "Don't let them burn the books." The third time, Ashford took her place and sent her to the table to rest. She did not rest. She sorted. From Lyle's spare cupboard she borrowed clean paper and, with Ashford's seal pressed into warm wax at each bottom corner, began copying key figures from the combined ledgers: Bellamy's advances, Cray's filings, contested parcel numbers, tenant names, duplicate after duplicate in her careful script, so if one set vanished, another might survive. At 3, Ashford looked up from Pike and saw what she was doing. "That is legal clerk's work," he said. "It is survival's work." He studied her a moment, then crossed to the table. "You are shaking." "So are you." He almost smiled, then didn't. "Fair." They worked side by side until dawn greyed the window panes and town bells tolled 6. When Pike woke again, the fever had broken enough for clarity to hold. "Mr." Lyle propped him with pillows despite his protests. 3 minutes, he warned. "No heroics." Ashford stood to one side, arms folded hard across his chest. Rebecca sat where Pike could see her without turning, pen poised over sworn paper. "Name," Ashford said formally. "Daniel Pike, senior courier in your Grace's service, 8 years. State what happened at Brackenmere Bridge." Pike breathed once, winced and began. This time the words came halting but coherent, each one an iron nail driven into place. He had carried Ashford's dispatch case openly and the critical legal briefs hidden in oilskin beneath the carriage seat, lining at Ashford's order. Near the bridge, riders forced the turnout where the parapet had already been weakened. One man, face muffled, demanded the case specifically. Pike resisted, saw Cray's quartered crest ring as the muffler slipped, was shot in the side and thrown toward the ditch when horses bolted. He heard one attacker say, "Take the case and leave the body. Road thieves get blamed and Bellamy gets his route." Pike paused, chest heaving. Lyle muttered a curse but let him continue. He added that 2 days prior he had delivered notices to tenants contesting recent debt seizures, families on former McCarthy land among them, and had been warned by a clerk in Cray's office that the signatures would stand dead men or no. Rebecca's pen slowed only once when Pike whispered, "Mrs. Henshaw signed with an X because she cannot write. Cray filed a full signature in copperplate." She thought of Mrs. Henshaw's bent hands, of children in patched boots, of winter ledgers balanced by hunger. Something inside her, long trained to endure, changed shape. When Pike finished, he sagged back, eyes closed. Lyle swooped in, ordered all of them out, and threatened murder if anyone spoke to his patient for 12 hours. In the passage, Ashford leaned against the wall, as if the stone were the only thing holding him upright. That statement touches half the county. More, Rebecca said. It touches every tenant who was told debt is fate. He looked at her then, truly looked without the lens of class or suspicion. If we file this, Cray will attack your character first. Lady Catherine will help him. Bellamy will call in every note he can. They already are. You could leave. I can arrange passage to my sister's household in York until this is over. It was not a command. It was unexpectedly an offer of escape. Rebecca pictured York, unknown streets, safer rooms, silence purchased by absence. Then she pictured the blue parlour, Bellamy's damp fingers, Lady Catherine's certainty that fear was enough to govern her. She pictured Mrs. Henshaw's forged name. "No," she said. Ashford's brows drew. "No to York. No to disappearing." She held up the pages she had written through the night, ink smudged at the edges where her hand had cramped. "You asked yesterday if someone paid me to delay your man. They did not. But they have been paying everyone else for years to look away, sign quickly, keep quiet. I am done being quiet." His answer came after a beat. "Then we proceed properly. Sworn copies, secured originals, quarter sessions petition by noon." "I will testify." He hesitated. "You understand what that costs." "My reputation?" Her smile was brief and fierce. "Lady Catherine spent years spending it on my behalf. Let us see if anything remains worth using." For the first time since she had met him, the Duke of Ashford bowed his head, not as one indulging a social inferior, but as one ally acknowledging another. "Very well, Miss McCarthy," he said. "Let us begin." "Very well, Miss McCarthy," he said. "Let us begin." They began in motion. Ashford sent one rider to his steward in Westhaven for sealed copies of the canal abstracts, another to the rector willing to witness sworn statements without waiting on county favour, and a third to fetch his London solicitor by express. He kept 2 men at Pike's door, one at the stair, one in the lane. Rebecca gathered the pages she had copied, sorted them by date, and marked each with cross-references in the margin, so even a hostile clerk could not pretend confusion. By the time the church clock struck 11, they had Pike's statement signed with a trembling hand, witnessed by Mr. Lyle and the rector, and wrapped in oiled cloth against weather and accident. Ashford took that packet himself. Rebecca carried the ledger copies and Bellamy's marriage articles in a satchel tucked under her cloak. They reached the county clerk's office 5 minutes before noon. The room was warm with coal smoke and stale ink, lined with shelves where other people's fates sat tied in ribbon. Behind the high desk, Deputy Clerk Baines glanced up, saw Ashford, and stood so quickly he upset his sandshaker. "Your Grace." "Petition for quarter sessions filing," Ashford said, placing the packet down. "Urgent, fraud, attempted murder, suppression of legal process." Baines reached for it, then stopped as another man entered from the inner room. Constable Reeves, hat in hand, expression apologetic and pleased at once. Beg pardon, Your Grace, I am instructed by Magistrate Hargreaves to advise that no extraordinary petition may be entered on testimony from an unexamined fever patient. Ashford's voice cooled. He has been examined by a surgeon and a rector, not by a magistrate-appointed physician. Reeves held out a folded paper. Order signed this morning. Rebecca took one look and felt her stomach drop. Hargreaves's seal. Cray's handwriting in the body text. Competency in doubt. Potential coaching by interested parties. Interested parties, she repeated softly. Reeves gave her a thin smile. You are named as such, miss. Ashford did not touch the paper. File it regardless. Let Hargreaves reject it in open record. Baines swallowed. I cannot, sir. Cannot. Another order was entered at 10. Temporary injunction regarding disputed canal parcels and associated household books. Brackenmere ledgers, designated private debt instruments, pending review in Bellamy versus McCarthy. No copies to be admitted without originals attached. Rebecca went very still. They moved before we did. Reeves shifted his weight. Also, miss, there is a civil complaint filed in your stepmother's name alleging theft of proprietary account documents and conduct prejudicial to household reputation. A lesser blow might have made her laugh. Conduct prejudicial. Ashford's control sharpened into something dangerous. Is this county now in the habit of treating a woman's reputation as evidence law? No, Your Grace, but gentlemen do dislike scandal attached to forged claims. Reeves gave a deferential half-bow to soften the insult. I only carry papers. Rebecca said, Who carries truth? No one answered. Outside, as they stepped back into the street, boys were pasting fresh broadsides to a wall near the pump. Rebecca saw her own name before she could stop herself. Caution to respectable households, Miss R. McCarthy, lately of Brackenmere, under question in improper connections with ducal servants and missing papers. No signature, no need. A fishwife reading over the boy's shoulder glanced up at Rebecca and then away too quickly, as if moral contagion might travel by eye. Ashford tore the broadside down in one hard strip. Reeves said 10 o'clock. They had this prepared before dawn. Lady Catherine doesn't improvise, Rebecca said. She curates. He looked toward the Hall Road. If originals are now the gate, we take originals. She shook her head once. She will have moved or altered them. Then we catch her altering them. How? With whose warrant? Hargreaves signs his own chains. Ashford's jaw set. With mine, if necessary. Your title does not break county seals. No, he said, but it can break doors. He meant it. She believed him. For one unsteady second she wanted to let him, wanted the clean violence of force after years of calculated humiliations. Then she thought of Pike upstairs breathing by stitches, of any excuse Cray needed to call Ashford reckless and invalidate everything. Not yet, she said. If you break one law for me, they will bury 10 crimes under it. His gaze snapped to hers, frustrated, then unwillingly respectful. You are asking patience while they salt the ground. I am asking precision. She adjusted the satchel strap on her shoulder. Take me to Brackenmere. If there's anything left, I know where to find it faster than any man they'll let through the front hall. Brackenmere looked unchanged from the road. Pale stone, clipped yews, the long windows shining with expensive calm. Only the yard told truth. 2 hired bailiffs stood by the service entrance with inventories in hand. A wagon already held 3 tea chests, a silver warming stand, and bundled ledgers tied in red tape. Rebecca stepped down before the carriage stopped moving. One bailiff moved to bar her. No entry. It is my father's house. Not on my list, miss. Ashford descended behind her, cloak flaring in the wind. Move! The man moved. Inside, chaos wore livery. Footmen carried crates under Mrs. Finch's weeping supervision. A maid wrapped porcelain in old Gazette sheets. Lady Catherine stood in the centre of it all in black silk daywear and jet beads, as composed as if hosting musicale rather than liquidation. "Your Grace," she said, inclining her head. "What an honour! We are in some disarray due to unfortunate debt calls." Bellamy emerged from the morning room with Edmund Cray at his shoulder. Cray's glove hid most of his hand, but as he lifted it in greeting, Rebecca saw, just above the kid leather, the edge of a blue stone set in old gold. Quartered crest, falcon, Pike had been right. "Miss McCarthy," Bellamy said cheerfully, "you've returned for your things? Efficient." "I've returned for account books." Lady Catherine laughed. "How diligent! Sadly, as Mr. Bellamy's legal adviser can explain, those instruments are now under protection." Cray bowed without warmth. Any attempted removal would constitute interference with secured property. Ashford stepped forward. "Those books are evidence in a criminal matter." Cray's smile barely shifted. "Alleged criminal matter based on compromised testimony from a delirious servant and an emotionally aggrieved relation. Hardly sufficient to interrupt lawful debt process." Rebecca took one step toward him. "Show me your right hand." Everyone blinked. Cray's expression thinned. "I beg your pardon?" "Take off your glove," Bellamy barked to laugh. "Really, this is beneath us." "It is exactly your level," she said. Cray did not remove the glove. Lady Catherine's tone turned razor-sweet. "Rebecca, enough! You mistake hysteria for courage. I learned courage on a frozen road while you sat by the fire." For the first time, colour rose in Lady Catherine's cheeks. "And now you stand in my hall insulting me before strangers. Leave." "Gladly," Rebecca said, "after I collect the laundry attic trunk." Lady Catherine's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "What trunk?" "There." A flinch, tiny, but there. Rebecca pivoted and ran. Up the back stairs, past the nursery landing, along the narrow servants' passage, where the wallpaper peeled in damp curls. She hit the attic door shoulder first. It banged open against the sloped wall. Her candle stub, gone. Slate, broken under boot heel. The board she had loosened beneath the eaves to hide copied pages, pried up and empty. Behind her, skirts rustled. Lady Catherine's maid stood in the doorway, breathless and triumphant. "Her ladyship had this room turned out at dawn." Rebecca crossed to the hearth anyhow, dropped to her knees, and clawed through ash with bare hands until black grit coated her fingers. Charred edges, fragments of figures, half a tenant name, hens, then nothing. The maid said, "Shouldn't have kept secrets." Rebecca sat back on her heels amid soot and splinters, and for one dangerous moment the room tilted, not because she had lost paper could be recopied, but because she had lost time. Every hour she had stolen from sleep, every candle end spent, burned down to grey dust in a grate. Boots sounded on the stair. Ashford appeared, breathing hard. She held up blackened fingertips like evidence from a battlefield. "She burned them!" He looked once at the hearth and swore softly, not like a duke. Below, voices rose. A Bellamy protesting, Cray invoking law, Lady Catherine demanding decorum. Ashford crouched beside Rebecca, close enough that she could smell cold wool and wind. "Can you stand?" "Yes." It was partly true. He offered his hand anyway. She took it and let him pull her up. At the foot of the stairs, Constable Reeves waited with 2 men and a fresh paper. "Miss McCarthy," he said, uncomfortable now, "by complaint of Lady Catherine McCarthy, I am to inform you that you are denied further entry to Brackenmere Hall and its grounds." Rebecca stared at him. I was born here." "I am sorry." Bellamy looked delighted. Lady Catherine looked relieved. Cray looked calculating. Ashford took the notice, read it once, folded it with precise care, and tucked it into his breast pocket, as if filing a future weapon. "We are leaving," he said. Rebecca walked out without looking back at the portrait over the main stair. Her father in hunting green, painted kind and confident by a man who had not foreseen this ending. In the yard, Mrs. Finch pressed a small bundle into Rebecca's hands. A spare chemise, stockings, her mother's thimble wrapped in cloth, then retreated before Lady Catherine could see. It was all she had left. They took rooms at the posting inn because there was nowhere else respectable to put a dispossessed gentlewoman under guard. Mr. Lyle sent word Pike slept. Fever low, pulse stronger. For 2 hours no one demanded anything from Rebecca except that she drink broth and keep from fainting. She sat by the narrow window, bundle in her lap, and watched rain begin over the yard. Each drop blurred the glass until Brackenmere's direction vanished in grey. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse. "I told myself I didn't care about that house, that it was stone and obligation. But when Reeves read the notice—" She stopped. Ashford, standing by the fire with his coat off, did not finish the sentence for her. "Home is still home even when it has teeth." She gave a small, startled sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes." A knock. Ashford's man entered, handed over sealed correspondence, and withdrew. Ashford broke one seal, read, and for the first time that day looked not controlled but tired to the bone. He set the letter down and rubbed his hand over his mouth. Rebecca watched him. "Bad news. My London solicitor cannot arrive before tomorrow evening. Hargreaves advanced the preliminary hearing to first light." He looked up. "They mean to lock procedure before help arrives." She closed her eyes briefly. "Of course they do." He moved to the table, braced both palms on it, and spoke without looking at her. "There is something I haven't said because it does not flatter me. Most true things don't." That drew a breath of almost amusement from him. Then he straightened and faced her, and when he did, the mask he wore in public seemed thinner. "In the War Office, 7 years ago, I signed transport orders I believed properly vetted. Someone in my department altered numbers after my review. Rations shorted, routes changed. 53 men marched into winter without supply." His voice stayed level by will, not ease. 21 died before relief reached them. Rebecca did not move. "I found the forged pages in time to expose the man who profited. Parliament called it corruption regardless. They were not entirely wrong. My name gave him cover, and my certainty killed men." He looked towards the rain-streaked pane. "Since then I trust documents more than people and doubt everyone who appears at the wrong moment, including you." There it was. Not polished apology, but wound. "I should not have accused you at Lyle's," he said quietly. "It was fear wearing arrogance." Rebecca held his gaze. "Fear of being deceived again. Fear of being responsible again." Something in her chest eased and tightened at once. "I do not need you to be infallible, Your Grace." "Julian," he said, then seemed surprised he had said it. She nodded once, accepting without ceremony. "Julian, then. I do not need infallible. I need you not to retreat when this becomes ugly." His answer came immediate. "I won't." He stepped closer, then stopped with careful distance, as if proximity itself were a promise he would not presume. "And if this ruins you publicly, it already has. I know. I am sorry. Then help me make it useful." He bowed his head once. "Always." Near midnight, the inn settled into creaks and muffled snores. Rain had turned to sleet, tapping at shutters like thrown sand. Ashford had just returned from checking Pike's guard at the surgery, when pounding erupted on the indoor below. Voices, boots, the sharp authority of men used to entering other people's rooms. A moment later, his steward's nephew burst into the parlour, white-faced. "Your Grace, surgery's been attacked!" The room snapped awake. Rebecca was already on her feet. "Pike! Gone, sir! Back window forced. One guard senseless. The other—" The young man swallowed. "The other's dead." For one stunned beat, no one spoke. Then a second voice sounded in the passage. Constable Reeves, breathless and rigid with official purpose. "Your Grace, Miss McCarthy, I require immediate compliance." He entered holding 2 documents. One is a warrant to detain Miss Rebecca McCarthy on suspicion of theft of dispatch materials and conspiracy to defame secured creditors. His eyes flicked to Rebecca, almost apologetic, then away. The second is an order from Magistrate Hargreaves. Absent Daniel Pike, all statements taken this day are stayed pending verification. Quarter sessions at dawn will proceed without his testimony unless he is produced. Sleet rattled harder against the panes. Rebecca felt the room contract around her. The warrant, the missing witness, the dead guard, every path narrowing at once. Ashford took 1 step toward Reeves. "Who signed the theft complaint?" Reeves hesitated. "Mr. Edmund Cray, on behalf of Lady Catherine McCarthy." "Of course," Rebecca said. Below, more boots thudded on the stairs. Not 2 men. Many. Ashford moved to stand between her and the door as the latch began to lift. "Behind me," he said, voice low and lethal. For the first time since the frozen road, Rebecca did. For the first time since the frozen road, Rebecca did. The latch lifted. 3 deputies pushed in first, wet cloaks shedding sleet onto the inn floorboards, with Reeves behind and Magistrate Hargreaves's clerk at his shoulder carrying a leather dispatch case like a priest carrying relics. Bellamy stood in the passage beyond them, breath clouding in the cold, smugness tucked neatly behind concern. "My dear Miss McCarthy," he said, "this need not be unpleasant if you cooperate." Ashford did not move from in front of her. "You have no authority to enter private rooms at midnight on civil papers." The clerk cleared his throat and held up a second folded order. "Criminal suspicion now attached, Your Grace. Theft and conspiracy. Drafted by Cray, signed by Hargreaves, delivered by Bellamy." Ashford's voice could have frosted glass. "Efficient." Reeves looked ill. "Please, do not make this worse." Rebecca stepped out from behind Ashford before he could answer. Every instinct told her to run, fight, scream, but panic had never balanced an account. "Constable," she said, "if I submit to detention, where am I held?" "The lower rooms at the Assembly House until dawn sessions." "Good! Then I demand to be brought directly before quarter sessions at opening bell." Bellamy laughed softly. "Demands, still." She ignored him. "I also demand my satchel be entered on record unopened, and that I be allowed pen and paper for my defence." The clerk started to object. Reeves cut in, perhaps to keep blood off his boots. "Noted." Ashford turned, low enough only she heard. "I can still get you out of this house." "And give them flight as proof?" She shook her head. "No. Find Pike." His hand flexed once. At his side, restrained violence in the tendons. Then he nodded. "I will bring him." As deputies closed around her, Bellamy stepped closer, voice pitched for her ear alone. "You should have chosen the material, Miss McCarthy." Rebecca met his gaze. "I did." The assembly rooms smelled of damp wool, sealing wax and anticipation. By dawn, every bench was filled. Tenants in rough coats, merchants' wives in winter silk, minor gentry hungry for spectacle, and 3 county ladies who had once admired Lady Catherine's table, now peering over fans as if scandal were theatre purchased with subscription. Rebecca sat at a narrow side table under guard, wrists free but watched, ink pot and blunt quill beside her. Across the hall, Lady Catherine floated in silver silk and mourning pearls, face composed to injured maternal sorrow. Cray arranged documents in ordered stacks. Bellamy whispered to Hargreaves near the dais, as if they were discussing weather. No sign of Ashford, no sign of Pike. At the stroke of 8, Hargreaves rapped for order. Quarter sessions convened in emergency review of disturbances concerning Ashford Canal petitions and associated allegations. Associated allegations? Rebecca repeated under her breath. She dipped the quill and began writing names as they were spoken, times phrasing every procedural bend. If they meant to bury her, she would map the grave as they dug it. Cray rose first, his voice carried, smooth and reasonable. My Lord Magistrate, we face an unfortunate campaign of defamation led by Miss Rebecca McCarthy, a dependent recently expelled from Brackenmere for impropriety and document theft. She has attached herself to a wounded servant of His Grace in hopes of leverage. We deeply regret the servant's disappearance, likely from fevered confusion. In his absence, we submit that all copied papers offered by Miss McCarthy are inadmissible, being unsourced and susceptible to fabrication. Murmurs rippled. Lady Catherine lowered her eyes at precisely the right moment. Cray continued, warming to his work. Further, we submit sworn testimony from Lady Catherine McCarthy that her stepdaughter has long exhibited emotional instability, vindictive fantasies regarding inheritance and— Objection, Rebecca said, standing. Every head turned. Hargreaves frowned. You will speak when called. Then call me now, she said, or admit openly this is verdict before hearing. A hush fell so hard the room seemed to lean forward. Hargreaves's nostrils flared. Very well, Miss McCarthy, take the stand and remember you are under oath. She crossed the floor alone. Not graceful, her hem still rain-spotted, her gloves borrowed and too large, but steady. Reeves administered the oath. Her voice did not shake. Cray approached with a thin smile. Miss McCarthy, where were you on the night of the bridge incident? In a ditch, binding Mr. Pike's wound after your men left him there. A rustle. Cray's smile did not move. You can prove those were my men? I can prove I carried him 3 miles while gentlemen debated responsibility. That landed harder than she expected. Someone in the rear said, God help us, almost reverent. Cray pivoted. Did you or did you not remove private ledgers from Brackenmere without Lady Catherine's consent? I copied household accounts I was ordered to maintain and never paid for. So theft. So literacy. A sharp, involuntary laugh escaped somewhere near the merchant's bench, quickly smothered. Cray's tone sharpened. You admit handling documents. You admit hostility toward your stepmother. You admit close and unusual contact with His Grace and his servant. Is it not true you invented this conspiracy to avoid a respectable marriage and gain ducal patronage? Rebecca looked at Lady Catherine, then at Bellamy, then back to Cray. No, but it is true your client tried to sell me to my stepmother's creditor in exchange for debt relief and canal liens. She reached into her reticule, withdrew Bellamy's marriage articles, and held them up. Entered under protest. Cray's hand shot out. Unverified paper? Read the margin clause 3 lines from bottom. Eastmarsh parcel secured by marriage settlement contingent on McCarthy signature. She turned toward the bench so everyone could hear. My signature was never given, yet lien actions were prepared. Bellamy rose half out of his chair. That is preliminary language. Prepared before consent, she said, as were your debt seizures, as were these broadsides naming me criminal before any warrant was signed. She placed one torn broadside on the evidence table. The paste on the back still smelled faintly of fish glue. Hargreaves frowned despite himself. "Date mark!" Reeves stepped forward reluctantly. "Printed by Cottle Press, sir. I saw copies posted before noon yesterday." Cray snapped, "Irrelevant to canal petitions." Rebecca turned to him. "Then let us make it relevant." She drew out 2 blood-stiff dispatch wrappers. Ashford's seal darkened, but intact. "These were wrapped round Mr. Pike when I brought him to surgery. Your name appears in his sworn statement, taken in the presence of Mr. Lyle and Reverend Pritchard, before he was abducted." "Abducted?" Hargreaves barked. "By whom?" Rebecca held his gaze. "That is what we are here to discover, unless this court prefers to discuss my character until lunch." The room broke into mutters again, no longer all hostile. Cray shifted tactics at once. "My lord, this woman is clever with insolence. Cleverness is not proof. We have brought the original Brackenmere books, surrendered voluntarily by Lady Catherine, demonstrating lawful debts and tenant acknowledgements." He gestured. A clerk carried forward heavy ledgers tied with new red tape. Lady Catherine lifted her chin, serene. "I have nothing to hide." Rebecca stared at the ledgers. New tape, freshly trimmed edges where old pages had been cut and re-sewn. If she had not spent nights with those books open on her knees, she might have missed it. But numbers had textures. Ink had age. "May I examine them?" she asked. Cray spread his hands. "By all means. Let us enjoy the performance." She opened the first volume. The paper at the centre gutter was whiter than the outer leaves. Page numbers jumped from 143 to 147, then corrected in another hand. She looked up. "These were altered." Cray smiled. "On what authority?" "Arithmetic." He laughed outright. "Arithmetic is not law." "No," she said softly. "But law collapses without it." She turned pages quickly now, finding what she needed by memory and pattern, not chance. There, entry for tenant Thomas Wren, debt call dated 14th May, signature acknowledged 16th May, witness Hale. She flipped to parish mortality extracts she had requested from Reverend Pritchard at dawn and only just received under guard, a risk that now might save her. "Question for Lady Catherine," Rebecca said. Hargreaves hesitated, then nodded. "Answer if you can, Lady Catherine." Lady Catherine rose with graceful reluctance. "If I must," Rebecca kept her voice mild. "On 14th May, why did you record payment from Thomas Wren 4 days after his burial on 10th May? Silence detonated. Cray moved instantly. "Clerical error?" Rebecca did not let him. "Second question. Why does Mrs. Henshaw's mark appear here as full copperplate signature when she cannot write her own name and signed parish register with an X for 20 years? Reverend Pritchard, white-faced in the second row, stood. "That is correct." Cray slammed a palm on the table. "Forgery by the copyist. She had access." Rebecca turned another page. "Third question. Why is Witness Hale spelled Hale in June entries and Hail in August by the same supposed hand on the same day?" Bellamy snapped. "Enough of this triviality." "Triviality?" Rebecca faced the room, voice ringing now without strain. "These trivial marks took farms from families who could not hire counsel, then laundered the land through debt calls tied to a canal route you meant to control before petitions could be heard." Hargreaves rapped for order, too late. The hall had surged into open noise, shouts from tenant benches, cries of "My father signed X," and "They took our lease in harvest." Then the doors at the back banged open. Snowlight and wind spilled in around 3 figures. Ashford, coat torn at the sleeve. Mr. Lyle splattered with mud, and between them, pale as paper, but upright with one arm in a sling and fresh bandage under his coat, Daniel Pike. He had arrived before the room could bury him. If Lady Catherine had fainted, perhaps sympathy might have saved her. She did not. She hardened. "This is absurd," she said over the uproar. "That man is drugged, coached, and barely standing. Must county justice bend to theatrics?" Pike swayed once. Ashford's hand hovered near his elbow without touching. Lyle muttered, 3 minutes, I swear it, as if daring death and magistracy alike. Hargreaves looked rattled, angry at losing control. "Order! I will have order!" Ashford strode to the centre aisle and bowed, formal as Parliament. "My Lord Magistrate, I submit. Live witness previously stayed by your order. He was taken from surgical care last night by armed men. We recovered him from Bellamy's old lime store by the lower lock, with one of Cray's clerks guarding the door. For the record, my missing dispatch case was recovered there only as a split shell, burned and emptied in the kiln. Its contents are no longer at issue because the authenticated briefs retrieved from beneath my carriage seat lining remain intact and are the operative originals before this court." Cray barked, "Lies!" Ashford tossed a signet ring onto the evidence table. It spun once and settled bluestone up, falcon quartering visible even from the rear benches. "Found on the clerk as he fled," Ashford said. Rebecca watched Cray's face go blank in that dangerous way of men recalculating damage. Hargreaves stared at the ring, then at Cray. "Explain." Cray drew himself up. "Coincidence. The ring was stolen years ago." Pike's voice came rough but clear from the aisle. "No, sir. Saw it on his hand when he shot me." Cray turned on him. "You fever-ridden fool! You'd swear to anything if told—" "Careful, Mr. Cray," Lyle snapped. "He remembers better than you forged." The hall erupted again. Hargreaves pounded the gavel until it cracked at the handle. "Enough! Mr. Pike, approach for oath." Pike took each step like climbing a hill with knives in his side. Rebecca moved without thinking, offered her arm. He accepted with a grateful grimace. Together they reached the stand. Reeves administered oath with trembling hands. Pike repeated his statement, slower than before but firmer with each sentence. Ambush at bridge, demand for case, Cray's ring visible, shot fired, words about Bellamy's route, hidden briefs in seat lining. Then he added what no one expected. "In the lime store?" he said, breathing hard. "I heard Mr. Bellamy tell the clerk if court asked. Say Miss McCarthy paid to stage delay and seduce confidence. Said no one believes a woman with mud on her him." Bellamy lurched up, red-faced. "Perjury!" Rebecca's fingers tightened on Pike's sleeve knot, and fear now, but fury so clean it felt like cold water. Cray pivoted again, fast as a duellist. "My lord, even if one accepts fragments, the chain of custody for all copied materials is contaminated by Miss McCarthy's admitted unsupervised handling. We move to strike every page she touched." Rebecca spoke before Hargreaves could. "Then strike me, but first compel production of Bellamy's private daybooks and Cray's filing drafts for the same dates." Cray scoffed. "Fishing expedition." "Not fishing reconciliation." She turned to Hargreaves. "You asked authority. Give me 30 minutes with both sets in this room before witnesses. If I cannot prove inconsistencies beyond clerical error, strike my evidence and hold me on your warrant." Gasps. Ashford's head snapped toward her, half admiration, half alarm. Hargreaves hesitated. Lady Catherine seized the pause. "This is extortion by spectacle," she said, voice finally cracking. "My husband gave that girl shelter. She repays me with slander because she cannot bear discipline. You all know how young women are. Impressionable, vain." Rebecca faced her fully. "No," she said quietly. You gave me work without wages, meals without welcome, and threats disguised as duty. You told me I had no power. You were wrong. I can count." For the first time, Lady Catherine looked uncertain. Hargreaves conferred hurriedly with 2 justices on the side bench, both now pale under the pressure of a room that had stopped behaving. At last he spoke. "Motion granted in part. Bellamy, daybooks, and Cray drafts to be produced immediately. Miss McCarthy allowed supervised comparison under oath. Any obstruction constitutes contempt." Bellamy sputtered. "Outrageous!" "Produce them!" Hargreaves barked, more to reassert command than from virtue. A runner flew, 10 minutes stretched like wire. No one sat. When the books came, Bellamy clutched them as if they were children. Reeves physically removed them and set them before Rebecca with sand shaker, fresh quills, and 2 clerks to witness. She worked standing. Columns, dates, ink colours, interest accrual intervals, filing fees. She spoke as she marked, forcing transparency so no one could claim trickery. Bellamy Daybook, 3rd of April, advanced to L. McCarthy £40. Cray draft filing fee dated April 2nd for same debt, filed before advance exists. Murmurs. Bellamy Daybook, June 17th. Collection from Wren Estate, signed T. Wren. Parish record burial, May 10th. Impossible unless resurrection now accepted in civil process. Louder murmurs. Someone actually laughed, bitter and disbelieving. Cray draft note to clerk. Use full signatures where marks appear. Cleaner in court. Initialed E.C. Cray lunged forward. Private notation, taken out of context. Reeves blocked him for once. Stand back, sir. Rebecca didn't pause. Interest rates in Bellamy books exceed capped county allowance by 2 points after each voluntary surrender. Pattern repeats 11 times. All parcels adjacent proposed Ashford cut. She set down the quill and looked up at Hargreaves. Soot-smudged cuff peeking from under borrowed sleeve. Face colourless with exhaustion and absolute certainty. "This is not error. It is system." Silence held 1 breath. 2. Then one of the side justices, old Sir Malcolm Trent, who had said almost nothing all morning, rose stiffly and spoke to Hargreaves in a voice built for hunting fields, and now turned judicial. "John, if you do not remand these men now, this county will think us purchased. Perhaps it already does." Hargreaves swallowed. For the first time he looked not powerful, but cornered. He called the order in clipped phrases. Edmund Cray and Horace Bellamy, remanded pending criminal inquiry into fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy to commit assault. Immediate seizure of all relevant books. Suspension of debt actions on disputed parcels. Temporary recusal of Magistrate Hargreaves from canal-related matters pending review by circuit judge. Lady Catherine McCarthy placed under supervised family custody until civil determinations complete. Forbidden contact with witnesses. Lady Catherine made one strangled sound. Not collapse, not surrender, something more furious than grief. "You ungrateful wretch!" she hissed at Rebecca as Reeves moved toward her. "I made you!" Rebecca answered almost gently. "No, you sharpened me." Bellamy fought, shouting about rank and property until 2 deputies took his arms. Cray went white and still, lips moving silently as if drafting appeals no one would hear today. Pike sagged. Lyle caught him with a growled, 3 minutes, I said, and you gave me 30, damn you! Half anger, half love. The hall exploded into voices, this time not scandal, but release. Outside the assembly room's snow had stopped. The square shone wet and bright under a thin noon sun, as if the world had been scrubbed with cold water. Rebecca stood on the stone steps because her legs would not yet trust level ground. People pressed close, not touching, watching her with a new uncertainty. Was she ruined girl, heroine, cautionary tale? perhaps all three at once. Mrs. Henshaw pushed through first, shawl crooked, eyes red. She caught Rebecca's hands and turned them palm up like a mother checking for burns. "They told us we signed," she said. "I thought I'd gone witless in my age. Thought maybe I had done and forgot." Her voice broke. "Thank you," Rebecca squeezed back. "You did nothing wrong." Behind Mrs. Henshaw came Thomas Wren's eldest son. Cap crushed in his fist. "Will we get the fields back?" Ashford, descending the steps with Sir Malcolm and Reeves in sharp conversation, heard and answered before any official phrasing could smother it. "Debt actions are stayed as of this morning. Interim possession reverts until circuit review. My steward will post notices by dusk." The young man stared, then nodded hard, eyes shining in a face trying very much not to weep. Reeves approached Rebecca awkwardly, hat in both hands. "Miss McCarthy, your detention order is void." He stopped, started again. "I should have questioned sooner." "You did question," she said, "just not aloud." He accepted the rebuke with a flinch and a grateful half-bow. When the crowd thinned, Mr. Lyle emerged with Pike bundled in blankets on a hired chair, cursing everyone equally. "Out of the way, vultures! If justice is done, let the man who survived it lie down." Pike caught Rebecca's sleeve as they passed. "Told you, don't let them burn the books." She smiled, despite the ache in every bone. "We didn't." At the edge of the square, a closed carriage waited with Lady Catherine inside under a matron's supervision. As it rolled past, she looked out once. Her face had not softened. If anything, stripped of audience, it looked smaller and harder, like metal cooled too quickly. She did not look at Ashford. She looked only at Rebecca. Rebecca met her eyes and did not lower hers. The carriage turned toward the Bath Road. Only when it vanished did Rebecca realise she was shivering, not from weather, from aftermath, from the body's belated claim after battle. Ashford came to stand beside her, close enough to shield, far enough not to presume. "Can you walk?" "Yes." That sounded like defiance, not fact. "It can be both." A hint of exhausted amusement touched his mouth. "Come, Lyle has banned all witnesses from dying of pride on his doorstep." She took one step, then another, down from the stairs where she had stood accused and answered. The square noise faded behind them. In its place came ordinary sounds she had once thought she might never hear again without fear. A cartwheel, a baker calling, church bells beginning the hour. The world had changed, not into fairness, but into possibility. That evening, after Pike slept, and Lyle grudgingly conceded he might live to insult people for decades, Ashford sent for Rebecca to meet him in the small withdrawing room at the inn. Fire banked low, one lamp lit, rain starting again in soft taps against the panes. She arrived in a plain gown borrowed from the innkeeper's wife, her own still in evidence bags and mud. Ink stained the side of her finger where no washing fully reached. She looked, Ashford thought, with a sudden fierce tenderness, exactly like herself. He stood when she entered and did not begin with title. "Rebecca! Julian!" He drew a breath as if stepping onto uncertain ground. "I asked you here because there are things I owe you in words, not gestures." She folded her hands, waiting. "I was raised to think protection meant provision and distance. Pay the bill, issue the order, keep emotion out where it can be used against you." He gave a short, humourless smile. "Useful in Parliament, useless in rooms like this." She said nothing, but her gaze softened a fraction. "I doubted you when you deserved trust. I used caution as an excuse for cruelty. And today, when you stood there with half the county ready to spit your name, you did what I should have done sooner. You made truth legible." His voice roughened on the last word. He didn't hide it. Rebecca looked down briefly, then back up. You stood with me. Eventually. Eventually counts when men with guns arrive. He huffed a breath that might have been a laugh, then sobered. No ornament, then. I love you. The room seemed to still around the sentence. No trumpets, no grand audience, only lamplight and rain and two people who had seen each other at their worst. I love your mind first, he went on, words gaining steadiness, as if truth made its own road. The way you cut through noise to pattern, the way you choose action over grievance, the way your anger serves the vulnerable and not your vanity. I love your courage, though it terrifies me because it sends you into danger before anyone can shield you. I love that you answer me as an equal even when every convention tells you not to. He took one step closer. I do not want gratitude. I do not want penance. I want a life with you if you choose it freely. Rebecca's throat worked once. You are very certain. I am terrified, he said, and certain. She moved to the table, touched the edge of a ledger he had brought almost unconsciously, as if they could never quite be apart from figures now. If I say yes to anything with you, it cannot look like rescue. I will not go from Lady Catherine's control to yours in finer rooms. You won't. I need legal independence, a dowry trust in my own name, inaccessible to husband's creditors, with right to direct funds to tenant schools and widows' relief. Done. Not promised, drafted. Tonight. She met his eyes, testing for flinch. Found none. And Bellamy's marriage bargain, its cancellation must be public, not whispered away. I will announce it in open market tomorrow with Reeves and Sir Malcolm present. She nodded once, as if checking items from a list. Then her voice shifted, quieter. There is one more condition. Name it. If we are to build anything, you do not get to retreat into ice when frightened. You speak, even badly. Something vulnerable crossed his face. I can do badly. Good. I am excellent at sharp replies. He laughed then, real and helpless with relief. I have noticed. Silence settled, warm this time. Rebecca stepped toward him until only inches remained. I love you too, she said, almost wondering at her own steadiness. Not because you are a duke. Frankly, that part is inconvenient. I love you because when I told you no, you listened. Because you learned. Because you came back for pike in a storm when easier men would have cut losses. Because you look at me and see not charity, but capacity. His eyes closed briefly, like a man hit by grace and pain together. When he opened them, they were bright. May I kiss you? Yes. He kissed her as if asking and answering at once, careful at first, then with the hunger of long restraint and earned trust. Her hands came up to his shoulders, feeling the tension there finally ease. When they parted, both breathing unevenly, she rested her forehead against his. No retreat, she murmured, no retreat. The next morning, true to word, he stood in the market square beside the pump where the broadsides had mocked her and read aloud a formal notice voiding all purported marriage negotiations between Miss Rebecca McCarthy and Mr. Horace Bellamy as coercive and legally defective. Reeves witnessed. Sir Malcolm signed. Townsfolk listened, avid and stunned. Afterward, in the rector's vestry, Ashford's solicitor, arrived muddy and furious from overnight travel, spread fresh parchment. Rebecca sat, read every line, amended 2 clauses, and only then signed the dowry trust into existence with ink that did not tremble. When she finished, Ashford signed beneath her, not over. The rector, watching, cleared his throat and said mildly, Most couples discuss flowers first. Rebecca looked at Julian. I prefer enforceable terms. So do I, he said, smiling. By late spring, Brackenmere's shutters were open again, though not for Lady Catherine. Sir Malcolm oversaw interim administration while courts finalised transfers, and on a bright morning smelling of thawed earth and lime-wash, Rebecca stood in the old schoolroom with sleeves rolled to her elbows, directing carpenters where to place new benches. "Not against that wall," she told one, tapping the plaster. "Damp rises there. Children will cough all winter." The carpenter blinked, then shifted the bench. "Yes, my lady." She still startled at the title, less for rank than for the absence of contempt in it. Mrs. Henshaw arrived with a basket of eggs and 2 grandchildren scrubbed nearly pink. "Brought these for the school fund," she said, setting them down as if placing treasure. "And these rascals to learn their letters proper so no one can sign for 'em again." Rebecca crouched to the children's height. "First lesson," she said, handing each a slate. "Your name belongs to you." In the corridor, Mr. Lyle argued with Ashford about drainage plans and refused to call him anything but man when irritated. Pike, thinner but alive and limping, had accepted a post-training estate, Messengers, and lectured them on never trusting a road merely because it looked straight. Bellamy was tried in summer assizes and fined heavily before removal to debtor supervision in York. His holdings along the disputed route were unwound parcel by parcel. Cray, struck off and prosecuted for fraud, left county under guard to face further charges in London. Hargreaves retired abruptly on medical advice no one believed. A letter came from Bath in Lady Catherine's angled hand, sealed with black wax. Rebecca opened it by the library window while rain ticked softly on glass. It contained no apology, only complaint about damp rooms, vulgar neighbours, and betrayal by those she had elevated. Rebecca read it once, folded it, and placed it in the file marked Correspondence Personal. Not forgotten, not governing. In August, she and Julian married quietly in the parish church at Ashford, with Pike and Lyle as witnesses, and Mrs. Finch crying openly into a handkerchief she pretended was for dust. At the door, Reeves nodded awkward congratulations and handed Rebecca a small parcel, the torn broadside, flattened and mounted behind glass. "For memory," he said. She considered, then smiled. "For warning." By autumn, the road below Brackenmere had hardened again under cold skies. One afternoon, Rebecca rode out in a plain travelling cloak, ink-stained gloves tucked into her belt because she had been editing school accounts until the last possible minute. Julian rode beside her, less immaculate now, mud already on one boot. Ahead, Pike led 2 young couriers at a sensible pace and shouted back instructions no one requested. At the broken bridge, now rebuilt in solid stone, they reined in. Rebecca looked down toward the ditch where she had once knelt alone in sleet and blood, shawl cutting into her palms, and felt the old ache rise and pass like weather moving through. Julian watched her. Too cold to stop long. Just a moment. She breathed marsh air, sharp and clean. Then she clicked her tongue and urged her mare forward, swift and sure. This time she did not drag the wounded weight of everyone else's decisions behind her. This time the road was hers.